The Arabs are not very happy about this. What they saw was a foreign power making decisions about their lives, which has been happening forever, directly contradicting their wishes in the process, and they felt it went against the earlier negotiations between Sharif and McMahon in 1915, in which Sharif was promised all this land. But more importantly, there was an inherent incompatibility, a contradiction within the document itself. It is impossible to balance the rights of the Arabs while establishing the country as a homeland for the Jews. You cannot do it. You cannot put 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack. You can't do it. And that's where the seed of this discord between the Arabs and the Jews was planted, and it has grown ever since. Beginning on December 9th, 1917, the British troops began to push out the Turks from Palestine because it was under the Ottoman Empire. They owned, the Turks owned it. And the Turks were part of the Axis, well, not the Axis, but Germany, and so they're losing the war. They're out. So the Brits began to push the Turks out. By October of the following year, Palestine is now under British military rule. 1917, the Brits now take over. They own it. And the struggle to find an acceptable resolution between the Arabs and the Zionists continued. After a series of meetings and conferences, the British Mandate was developed. And this further cemented the goals of the Zionists to take over the Palestine. This mandate said there is a historical connection between Palestine and the Jewish people. The British should help secure the establishment of the Jewish national homeland. And most importantly, a Jewish entity should assist in coordinating and developing this effort by regulating Jewish immigration and ensuring, again, the rights of other sections of the population are not prejudiced. Oh, yeah. Well, that entity was called the Jewish Agency. And behind that group was the World Zionist Organization, both groups run by Chaim Weizmann. So the British Mandate now gives the Zionists a renewed sense of purpose. They begin to believe not only is it going to settle the Palestine issue, but they can also set up their own political state. Well, you can imagine the Arabs are furious. They're insane over this British Mandate. They argue that all the previous agreements made with them are not being honored. They're saying, hey, you lied to us. Also, they dislike the fact that the language in the British Mandate referred to them as, quote, other sections, not even people. They were literally just other sections. By the way, at this time, the Arab population was 88% of Palestine. It was all Arab, or mostly Arab. So by this time, the Arab people are having an identity crisis. A number of previous agreements for an Arab homeland are being reneged by various European countries who are busy either transferring power, issuing empty promises, or simply carving up the Mideast for themselves. And this created a series of divisions within Arab society. For example, the rich, powerful Arab elite lost their legitimacy when they aligned themselves with the foreign governments. The rest of Arab society were trying to figure out if they should continue to try to make the best of their changing territory or to stick with their nationalism fervor. Now, this lack of cohesion among the Arab people hindered their efforts against the coordinated work of the Jews and their intention to establish their homeland in Palestine. See, this is why the Jews prevailed. The Jews were cohesive. They were together. They had a common purpose. The Arabs did not. They were scattered all over the place. They were there doing the Arab circle jerk with each other. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on, which, by the way, to this day still works out. The Arabs can't figure anything out by themselves. You know, the Jews, at least, are a cohesive group. Now, there's one guy who tried to have a go at this mess and attempted to make this work. His name was Sir Herbert Samuels, the High Commissioner of Palestine. And it was his job to develop Palestine with the help of Arabs and Jews while keeping the area under British control. The Jews continued to immigrate into Palestine during their 20s. Sir Herbert offers the opportunity to other Arab organizations to take part and decide how to limit Jewish immigration. The Arabs rejected the offer. Why? Because if they accepted the invitation, it would mean they have to accept the terms of that British Mandate and the Balfour Declaration, and they were not going to buy into it. Even though they would have an equal say in the direction and development of Palestine under these agreements, they refused to participate. They had the opportunity in the 20s to carve the state up into a Jewish homeland, an Arab homeland of Palestine. They said, absolutely not. There will be no Jews in this area. When we come back, I will continue the story of why these people hate each other so much. 824, Bill Handel. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio.
KFI AM 640.
It's 8:36, KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio. Bill Handel, we continue with the history of the Mideast. Why the Arabs, why the Israelis hate each other so much. We just went through the old history, brought you to the early part of the 20th century in the 20s, when the Brits came up with an idea. Tell you what, we'll split Palestine. Jews, Arabs, you can each have your own homeland, and everybody will live happily ever after. Arabs said, absolutely not. There will be no Jews living on this land. So now, the animosity is growing between Jews and Arabs. The sale, though, of the land between the two groups continued. Jews that still approach Arab landowners, many who lived outside of Palestine, would purchase the property. They bought this land like 4 times over. By the 1930s, the price of land spiraled out of control for this spit of desert. Consequently, the Arab peasants who farmed the land couldn't even afford the rents to the landowners. The British saw what was going on because the British controlled all of this. They did nothing to stop it because the cost of World War I had depleted the British reserves so much they needed the money from the Jewish investments to help fund this British mandate in Palestine. So the Arabs are fighting amongst themselves and the others. Jews continue to stream into Palestine, and they organize themselves into a pretty formidable group. This coordinated effort led to many advancements in Palestine. At this point, the Jews now brought in new farming technologies. They developed welfare services. They opened up schools, hospitals, synagogues. They were buying land at a furious pace. They were building a country, is what they were doing in the 30s. And the man primarily responsible for organizing all this was David Ben-Gurion. He was able to develop an economic and military infrastructure that would enable the Jewish people to defend themselves. And he understood what was going to happen in the future. There's going to be a war with the Arabs. The desire of the Jews and the Arabs to establish their own homeland in the same place in Palestine was irreconcilable. The two could not exist at the same place. Now, there was another set of circumstances that pushed the Jews closer to establishing the homeland for themselves. 1929, Germany is going through an economic meltdown. One guy rises to power, convincing the Germans there was one reason for their problem: Jews. Adolf Hitler. His degree of anti-Semitism was delivered with such intensity that many of the Jews living in Germany fled and started going to Palestine. When Hitler became chancellor in 1930, the immigration increased: 37,000 in 33, 45,000 in 34, 61,000 in 35. By 36, Jews had made up almost a third of the population of Palestine. Now, that same year, the Arab frustration began to boil over. In April of 36, a series of Arab attacks gave way to the Palestinian revolt. A group of Arab parties formed together and made 3 demands: a halt to Jewish immigrants, no more land sales to the Jews, and the formation of an Arab government in Palestine. Well, this came as a bit of news for the Brits. They didn't like that because they were planning to go to war with Germany. So they needed oil from the Middle East. In order to get that oil, Britain needs to shore up its ties with the Arabs by appeasing them over the issue of Palestine. So all of a sudden, the Brits flip over and become pro-Arab, just like a lot of the world. It needs oil. And the Jewish influence over Britain is now declining. Most of the pro-Jewish British members of Parliament are transferred out of office, and the Jews had no choice. They had to support Britain in their campaign anyways against Hitler and the Jews and the Germans. So they were stuck between a rock and a hard place. So the Brits started appeasing the Arabs. They had a hard time. By the mid-30s, the Jews had already firmly planted themselves in Palestine with their economic and military investments. And even if the Arabs were able to set up their own government, they could care less about looking after the Jewish community. So the Brits could only see 3 options: get out, leave the Arabs and Jews to fight for themselves; cordon off the Jewish and Arab areas; or stick around and see what happens. And in 1937, they got their answer. A royal commission was dispatched to Palestine to assess the situation. This was the Peel Commission, which reported that the British mandate was a failure. The obligation that the Brits had to the Jews and the Arabs was impossible to continue. So what do you think the commission recommends? To separate Palestine into 2 states, one Arab, one Jew. Nazareth, Bethlehem, and Jerusalem would stay under British control. Well, the Jews didn't like the proposed boundaries, but they did agree to the principle of dividing up the land. They said, we'll live in 2 countries. The Arabs said, absolutely not. We will not